Mr. Speaker, I wish to acknowledge the fact and congratulate the Minister of Finance in bringing Budget 2016 to this National Assembly and fulfilling his duties and obligation in the FMAA. Mr. Speaker, Budget 2016 is indeed presented and prepared in a highly complex global economic environment. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister in his speech attempted to paint a rosy picture of the economy by citing some of the traditional macroeconomic indicators, such as GDP, inflation, balance of payments, and fiscal balances. In his speech, the Honourable Minister reported GDP growth of 3% and deflation of 1.8%. Based on these figures, we were expected to believe the fairy tale story that the average Guyanese enjoyed the good life as promised last year. Mr. Speaker, the fact of the matter is that the good life was an elusive dream, the most and only a reality for a select few. The increased income, the wonderful 3% economic growth was supposed to create, never enhance the real spending power of the average man. Moreover, the lower prices hardly did very little to stimulate greater spending by consumers. The bottom line is that the utility of the average man never improved, and the good life was simply a mirage. Indeed, the statistics reported by the Minister suggest an erosion of the well-being of the average person and question growth story that was read to this Honourable House last week. The erosion of the well-being of the average Guyanese may be gleaned from observing other macroeconomic indicators conveniently overlooked by the Honourable Minister. What are these indicators? 1. Consumer spending. Consumer spending, as reflected by the wholesale and retail trade sector, recorded negative growth last year and was at the lowest ever over the past 4 years, according to Appendix 2 of the budget speech. Notwithstanding the expansion of GDP, consumer spending was depressed as Guyanese spent less. In 2012, for example, Mr. Speaker, consumer spending was $49.352 billion. In 2015, it eroded to $47.181 billion. The source of this information is in Appendix 2 of Budget Speech 2016, page 77. 2. Value-added tax and merchandise import. VAT, which is a tax on spending, also slipped by 5.2%, again conforming consumer spending, while merchandise import declined by 17.7%, or US $316.4 million, from US $1.791 million in 2014 to reach US $1.74 million during 2015. It is instructive to note, Mr. Speaker, that the merchandise import for 2015 was significantly below the levels reported for the past 4 years. According to the Bank of Guyana Statistical Bulletin, in 2012, it was $1,996 million, and in 2015, $1,474 million. Mr. Speaker, number 3 is non-performing loans. Non-performing loans, which is considered a leading indicator of a country's economic health, clearly points to skyrocketing bankruptcy and the inability of Guyanese to even service their debts. Based on the Bank of Guyana half-year report for 2015, non-performing loan was 20.4 billion, almost 2 times the level at the end of 2012, which was $10.2 billion. Mr. Speaker, non-performing loans moved from 10.2 billion at the end of 2012 to 20.4 billion in the mid-year report of 2015. The sector which received the hardest blow and reported the largest increase in non-performing loan was the services sector, which saw NPL increasing from 4.8 billion at the end of 2014 to reach 6.9 billion at the end of June 2015. Many businesses in this sector were forced into bankruptcy because of reduced spending. The growth in the non-performing loans for the household sector also speaks volume of the spending power of ordinary Guyanese who borrowed from the banking sector. The half-year report of the Bank of Guyana showed that NPL grew by a whopping 63.5%, Mr. Speaker.
Wow. Unbelievable.
How do we reconcile the fairy tale story of increased income when more persons are unable to pay their debts and entering bankruptcy? While some may argue that statistics tell false tales, the headline stories in the newspaper last year questions the good life fairy tale presented last week. For the benefit of the honorable members in this house, let me read some of the headline stories from various media houses. Stabroek News, August 5th, 2015. Private sector concern, economic slowdown can spur non-performing loans. Taichung News, August 5th, 2015. PSC deeply worried about decline in economic activities. Guyana Times, October 12th, 2015. PSC mom on government's role to stimulate economy. And Demerara Waves, July 25th, 2015. Slow businesses forces staff retrenchment. And in spite of all these headlines, that was verified by the media, Mr. Speaker, the Minister of Finance reports in the budget that there was no report of unemployment in 2015. A fairy tale, a fallacy. And I will point out more directly to information that is available to the Minister of Finance to argue against that fact that he stated in the budget speech. That fairy tale, not fact. Mr. Speaker, the question on the lips of the ordinary Guyanese is, where is the good life? On behalf of the people, I wish to ask the Honorable Minister, how is it possible for the average Guyanese to enjoy the good life when consumer spending is contracting, bankruptcy occurring at an alarming rate, and at risk, vulnerable Guyanese are now enjoying less than under the PPP administration? How can the Honorable Minister come to this House with a straight face and tell the Guyanese they enjoyed a good life when each pensioner was deprived of the electricity and water subsidy amounting to 50,000 annually and 500 million collectively? When over 100,000 poor families were deprived of the 10,000 cash grant by the scrapping of the Because We Care initiative, robbing these families of approximately 2 billion in disposable income annually. The consumers of gasoline and diesel were literally squeezed at the pumps by paying in excess of 2.6 billion because the government refused to pass on the benefits of falling oil prices. Mr. Speaker, as I noted in my initial remarks, the good life is an elusive dream to the average Guyanese, but enjoyed by a select few. Despite initial denial and some PR gimmicks, it is public knowledge that ministers were granted substantial increases in salaries and benefits without any consultations. Our Prime Minister is now benefiting from annual salary of $20,580,000 and perks totaling $500,000, while the Vice Presidents, Cabinet Ministers, and Junior Ministers benefit from $11.1 million, $10.4 million, and $8.3 million respectively, and perks more than the annual increase granted to the public servants. Mr. Speaker, contract workers were also fattened by handsome pay packages. The estimate shows that contracted employees will receive approximately $3.6 billion. Mr. Speaker, on restoring confidence and effective macroeconomic management. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Minister indicated that confidence was restored and more investments were made last year. The Minister noted that Go Invest facilitated numerous projects and highlighted the potential value of the investments. I admire the skillfulness of the Minister to highlight, and I quote, the potential value of investment facilitated by Go Invest and the potential jobs likely to be created, rather than state the actual investment and actual number of new employment opportunity that originated from these investments. A quick glance at Appendix 5 of the budget speech tells a different story with respect to investment, Mr. Speaker. According to Appendix 5, foreign direct investment for 2015 was $125 million, significantly below the target of $217 million, and half the size of FDI reported in 2014 when the PPP Civic was in government. Half the size of FDI in 2014. Moreover, Mr. Speaker, if you take out the investment of the two large gold mining company and what is coming in for oil, we actually have nil FDI in any of the other productive sectors. Mr. Speaker, it is instructive to note that FDI for 2015 was below the levels reported over the last 5 years. Even 2011, when we had elections and the global economy was in turmoil, the excuse for the lower investment cannot be blamed on election or the downturn in the global economy. Because even in 2011, when we had the worst downturn in the global economy and elections at the same time, we recorded higher foreign direct investment. Mr. Speaker, all the major investments last year were made when the PPC was in government. The photo opportunity and ribbon cutting exercise cannot erase this fact. In 2012, foreign direct investment was $363.6 million. Mr. Speaker, I want us to understand the decline. In 2012, FDI was $363.6 million. In 2015, it is $125 million. Mr. Speaker, in terms of the business's climate and investors' confidence, the FDI is not only an indicator which suggests the economy is slipping and sliding downwards. The non-performing loans of the business enterprises tell the story better about what is really happening in our local private sector. According to the Bank of Guyana, third quarter statistical bulletin of 2015, the non-performing loans of business enterprise exploded. This is the Bank of Guyana, Mr. Speaker. The non-performing loans of business enterprises exploded as businesses struggle to meet their loan payments. This is what the report of the Bank of Guyana states on page 9. And I quote, non-performing loans remain concentrated in the business enterprise sector at 74.9% of the LDFI's aggregate. NPL, and within that sector, were further concentrated in the services and manufacture subsector, which held 48.8% and 25.5% respectively. Mr. Speaker, what we have is not an expansion of the private sector, but contraction. And the minister must accept this. We cannot plan, we cannot implement measures if we don't use the statistical information before us and accept the reality. And what is that reality? Mr. Speaker, the reality is that the private sector is not expanding, but at a stage of contraction. Even more worrying is the situation where the banking system is saddled with toxic loans that will serve to dissuade lending to the private sector. Unless the government intervenes, we may very well have a financial and economic crisis that will cause billions to escape and magnify the current economic crisis brewing. Mr. Speaker, I present these facts not to make the government look bad, but for us to understand that if we do not intervene, we can have a complete collapse of our financial and economic system. The Minister of Finance, Mr. Speaker, is an honorable man, and I know he will accept the fact that we do have an economic and financial crisis brewing.
Come on, Minister, accept this declaration.
Mr. Speaker, given our economic conditions, any responsible leader will take preemptive action instead of hiding their heads in the sand and hoodwink the public with fancy speeches that are muddled with half-truths. To put it bluntly, Mr. Speaker, we don't have real growth in investment. Because of the slowdown in the economy, fewer jobs were created last year by the private sector. For a government which campaigned on the slogan of creating jobs, it is quite bothersome. The lengthy budget speech hardly focused on the issue of job creation. In the entire speech, Mr. Speaker, the word job was mentioned 3 times, on pages 24 and 27. These are the extracts from the budget speech as it relates to job creation. The potential on page 24, the potential value of 24 investment facilitated amounted to 89.3 billion, while the total potential jobs number about 8,400. By upgrading and building industrial estates at Belvedere and Lethem will facilitate business ventures in such areas as light manufacturing, woodworking and fabrication, creating over 3,000 new jobs. Mr. Speaker, the Belvedere site and Lethem site is not operational. Lethem is partly operationalized. Belvedere is not operationalized. The lead time or the lag time that businesses would need to establish their facility would be about 24 months. So where is this 3,000 jobs coming from? This potential 3,000. It is a fairy tale story. Mr. Speaker, unlike the budget presented by the PPC when it was in government, and which provided specific information, Mr. Speaker, our budget, which the Honorable Minister Winston Jordan was very proudly a part of, always provided specific information of jobs created. This new government is shy to talk on the issue that it campaigned on last year. You campaigned on job creation. How in the budget you would only mention it 3 times? The word 3 times. Mr. Speaker, the harsh truth is that jobs were not created last year. Instead, there was a reduction in employment opportunities, especially in the private sector. The fact is, reported in the Bank of Guyana half-year report. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Finance may wish to correct the statement in his budget speech, when he said that there was no reported job loss in 2015. Let me read for the Honorable Minister what the Bank of Guyana half-year report says on page 7. And I will quote, preliminary estimates indicated a deceleration in private sector employment due to the reduction in activities primarily in the construction and mining industry. Mr. Speaker, the government conveniently refuses to speak to this issue. May be explained to the hard facts reported in the Bank of Guyana report. There was a deceleration in employment opportunity due to lower activities in key sector. Check the end up here. On the issue of sound macroeconomic management, Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Minister would want us to believe that the new government is managing the economy effectively by citing the fiscal balances. According to the Honorable Minister, the fiscal deficit contracted. However, when you read his speech and examine the statistics on the fiscal performance, there is very little to celebrate. The improved performance was due mainly to lower spending by government, caused by its inability to implement the public investment program. Mr. Speaker, this is an old accounting trick. The academics and practitioners refer to this as expenditure or consumption smoothing. It is a trick where you postpone spending to give the false impression of a good bottom line. Had the government implemented the public investment program, the fiscal balances would have been substantially larger, and the overall deficit as a percentage of GDP would have been 2 to 3%. But Mr. Speaker, is this bad? The answer is no. Any responsible government would have ensured the successful implementation of public sector investment program as a counter-cyclical measure to halt the decline in the economy and stimulate spending. However, the coalition government played it safe, and we now have low growth, contraction in spending, and less employment opportunities. We are in this economic quandary because of the decision by a coalition government to stall the public sector investment program, which contributes approximately 1 percentage point to economic growth and cushions external debt. In short,
Honourable Member, you have 7 minutes remaining.
In short, our coalition government induced a slowdown in the economy by cutting back on capital spending when the economy was in decline. Mr. Speaker, this cannot be sound economic management. Let us look at the measures. Mr. Speaker, to sum it up, the measures can be stated as taxing the poor while promoting special interests. Mr. Speaker, after almost 1 year in office, one would have expected to see measures in the budget that will serve to fulfill coalition promises, which included reduction in value-added tax. Where has the promise of reduction of value-added tax gone? Doubling of the old age pension and public assistance. Where has this promise gone? increase in personal income tax threshold to 100,000. Where has this promise gone? Rationalization of the VAT and excise tax on motor vehicles and on diesel with the aim of encouraging the importation of energy-efficient vehicles and rational importation policy as regards vehicle age. Mr. Speaker, based on the budget speech, there will be no reduction in value-added tax, but exemption for parboiled rice, packaging material, other malt extracts, other than Ovaltine, and personal effects for remigrants, who, by the way, qualify for exemption from custom duties under the Custom Acts. From all indication, Mr. Speaker, the reduction of VAT is not something Guyanese can expect this year or in the near future. According to an article carried by Kaitor News, the Honorable Minister clearly stated that the reduction of VAT is not likely to happen soon. Based on the budget speech, VAT will not be reduced this year. Instead, Guyanese should prepare to pay more VAT, since the Honorable Minister has signaled the government intention to collect approximately 38.98 billion in VAT, 9% more than the 35.7 billion collected in 2015. Old age pension. Mr. Speaker, old age pension will increase by $1,200 monthly in 2016, instead of being doubled by $13,125 monthly as promised by the coalition government. Public assistance will increase by a paltry $800 in 2016 instead of being doubled. The coalition government would only increase the income tax threshold from $50,000 to $55,000 instead of $100,000 per month as promised in its manifesto. With this type of marginal increase in the threshold, it will take approximately 10 years to realize the promise of $100,000 per month. The failure to fulfill these promises, Mr. Speaker, is a breach of the social contract between the coalition government and the people who voted it into office. Mr. Speaker, other proposed measures in the 2016 budget include a reduction of excise tax on motor vehicles under 4 years and ban on vehicles older than 8 years. This measure...
I remember you have 3 minutes remaining.
This measure will now make it difficult or impossible for the poor Guyanese to own a vehicle. With these amendments, it will now cost approximately $5.7 million and $6.2 million to import the cheapest 1,000 to 1,500 and 1,500 to 2,000 cc vehicle that is under 4 years old. This compares with an average cost that range between $2 million and $3 million for cars older than 8 years old. It is hard to see how poor Guyanese will benefit from these new measures when finding the initial investment for the used cars is challenging. The only beneficiary will be importers of new vehicles, the banks and insurance company, which may now want to extend larger loans and charge higher premium for vehicle owners. Additionally, the government has outlined an extensive range of measures to tax the nation further by increasing the fees paid on various licenses, including driver's license, fitness, motor vehicle license, license for car drawn by horse, pony, donkey, mule, liquor license, among others. These measures will certainly affect the poor, especially micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises, which will now be burdened with higher indirect taxes. To add to the burden, the 2016 budget is proposing amendment to the Tax Act, which makes it mandatory for the licensed applicant to file annual returns and clear all outstanding taxes. Imagine the reporting burden that the owner of a taxi, donkey cart, video rental businesses, ordinary small trader, who will now...
Honourable member, your time is up.
Mr. Speaker, in accordance with the agreement, the honourable member has 30 plus 5 minutes, and therefore I wish to request that he be given the 5-minute extension, sir. Thank you.
I thank the honourable member. I would grant the 5 minutes, but I would suggest that that request is made before the member exhausts his time. At this point, the member has reclaimed his seat. Please proceed, honourable member, for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the higher license fees and additional costs for preparing tax returns will certainly erode cash flow of these entrepreneurs. This is not a budget for the working class, pensioners, and medium-small enterprises. This budget takes away more from the poor. The benefits for the poor, on the other hand, are a few hundreds more to the pensioners, a few 20s for the vehicle owners who will benefit from a $20 reduction per litre of gas, a $9 reduction per diesel. Poor household will also benefit from a $30 reduction in kerosene. Apart from the obvious disregard for the working class, the budget makes no provision for key sectors such as sugar, rice, and mining. Sugar and rice contributed over $14.9 billion to our gross domestic product, earned over $300 million in foreign currency, and support the livelihood of poor rural communities last year. But what has the government did? They flippantly treated these two sectors as non-existent. Mr. Speaker, notwithstanding the improved performance in the sugar industry, we are told that some estates will be closed, and with over 1,000 workers, along with their families, being placed on the breadline. The businesses, mostly MSME, operating in the areas where these estates operate, will also be adversely affected. It was not enough to punish the sugar workers by depriving them of their annual production incentive. We now have to close the estate to add further insult to injury. Where is the good life for the sugar workers? They were not paid for their hard work. They're also promised more hardship, despite the promise of a good life. Like the other promises made by the coalition government, this one will be broken. Mr. Speaker, the rice farmers, who were also promised between 6,000 and 9,000 per bag, are now being punished with lower prices. To add further insult, the farmers are told that rice is not government business. Mr. Speaker, we have very little reason to doubt the government, as the Honourable Minister forecasted a decline of 57.7 thousand tons in rice production for 2016. If this forecast is true, then it means that the rice farmer will not be in the group to enjoy the good life, as they will suffer significant losses in income. Mr. Speaker, if you were to use the export price of $79,000 per ton of rice, as reported by the Bank of Guyana third quarter 2015 report, we are talking about a loss in export revenue amounting to $4.6 billion. This represents loss in income for stakeholders attached to the industry, which is equivalent to $22.4 million US. The stakeholders in the rice industry will lose $22.4 million US. Already, the farmers are in financial distress from the sharp reduction in prices due to the mishandling of the Petro-Caribbean deal.
Honourable member, you have 2 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, in closing, I wish to restate a point I made in my opening remarks. The good life is an illusion for most and a reality for a select few. If you're a minister,
definitely you would have enjoyed the good life. The Prime Minister, Vice Presidents, Cabinet Ministers, and junior ministers are richer today than when they took up office. The contract workers are also richer today with the handsome payouts as reflected by the $3.7 billion for this category of workers. However, the pensioners, poor families, rice farmers, sugar workers, and public servants are yet to enjoy the good life. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, Budget 2016 will not deliver the good life for these Guyanese. The pensioners are offered pensions and public assistance which are below the levels that they were promised. The sugar workers are not rewarded for outstanding performance. The rice farmers are crippled with low prices. The reduction of VAT is not going to come true. The poor will have to pay substantially more for vehicles. The only group outside of the ministers who will gain from Budget 2016 are the contract workers, the businesses involved in importation of new vehicles, and the special interest group, which according to the Honorable Minister of Natural Resources should be rewarded for the contribution and investment in political parties. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I thank the Honourable Member for his statement. Next speaker is the Honourable Dominic Gaskin. You have the floor, sir.